These are players that come playoff time, if you can afford to have them off of your roster, they're probably not going to help you in the playoffs. In fact, they might end up hurting you. And you could capitalize by selling high on them right now. Let's talk about our first guy here. It's going to be Javonte Williams. Javonte is a curious case because you did see him have his best game of his career, really, where he had 2 touchdowns a couple weeks ago. There are a couple concerning signs for Javonte Williams. Number one is going to be his usage, right? You've seen his usage decline pretty steadily over the last 3 weeks. He's gone from about 70% of snaps down to closer to 50% of snaps. And this is concerning because over the past couple weeks, he's actually not been efficient at all. He's been averaging under 4 yards per carry pretty consistently. He's not really breaking off big plays. In terms of the usage, he is sharing that backfield with a couple other guys here. Jaylen McLaughlin, it's 39-23 this week against the Baltimore Ravens for those 2 backs. Routes run 21-15. Targets, actually, Jaylen McLaughlin got 1 more. The carries are only 12-5, and so he's getting the majority of the carries there still. But you have seen his workload dip. You also have Audric Estime, who wasn't really a factor early in the season. Obviously, he was injured, but he's coming now, and he did play 7 snaps and had 5 carries himself. So the combination of Jaylen McLaughlin and Audric Estime combined for 10 carries today, while Javonte Williams had 12 carries. And so you have seen his workload decline ever so slightly. That's not really the main reason I'm concerned about Javonte, but it definitely is one thing that I'm pointing to because the offense overall has looked better for the Broncos, I will say that. But again, with Javonte, I mean, when he's not really scoring touchdowns in his last 4 games, 10 points, 9 points, 4 points, 16 points, then 10 points, 6 points, 11 points, 3 points. He's really not been impressive. He's the running back 30 on the season coming into this week. And yes, he was productive-ish today because he had 3 targets, 2 receptions for 42 yards. You take away the receptions, though, I mean, he really wasn't doing anything. And the thing with Javonte also that I'm going to point to that's for a good reason to sell Javonte Williams is when you're looking at his playoff schedule, he does have some tougher matchups. He has Indianapolis in week 15. That's a good matchup for him. Week 16, that's a tough matchup against the LA Chargers. And so that's going to be a tougher matchup in the playoffs where it could end up losing the game. Cincinnati Bengals is kind of a wash. Not really a super good defense one way or the other. But the Chargers in week 16, I'm looking at and saying I really don't want to have him on my team that week, especially if some of these other guys are going to continue to get involved. And so with Javonte, it's not really the playoff schedule, well, like it is with some of these other guys, and it's more the usage, the involvement of Estime and McLaughlin in that offense, and the fact that Javonte Williams hasn't really been productive and hasn't really been efficient efficient all this season. So I'm looking to sell Javonte Williams. I think you can get a decent return for him right now. He has had a decent last couple games, but again, I think this is probably going to be his ceiling. You haven't really seen him live up to it in terms of where he's being drafted this year. So shop him, see what you can get. You might have to hold him because it might be a sell low. But again, I think if you can get much for Javonte Williams, I'm going to take much over Javonte Williams, to be honest with you. So,
Kyle Pitts has been one heck of a roller coaster this year when you're talking about his value, when you're talking about his status of being a buy or a sell or a hold. We're out on Kyle Pitts for the rest of the season, especially when it comes to just how he's looking down the line with his playoff schedule. But with Kyle Pitts specifically, his targets are just all over the place. Outside of his Week 5 8-target game where he had 15 points and Week 7 9-target game against Seattle where he had 13 points, the dude has had 3, 4, 5, 3, 5, 5, and 1 targets. That is not cutting it. You're getting more target volume from Zach Ertz on a weekly freaking basis than you are from Kyle Pitts right now. And am I exaggerating slightly? Yes. But with Kyle Pitts, I think one of the things that wasn't noted as much as it should have been is coming off of his 25-point game where he had 91 yards off of 4 receptions and 2 touchdowns. You're like, okay, maybe we could live with that and see how he's going to be utilized more in future weeks. His snap share went down to 48% in that game.
Yeah,
48%.
That's why he's on this list
compared to being in the 70s or 80s for the first half of the year. What happened? I think he's just on the field less. And that's because of the way that they're operating their offense. It also has to do with Darnell Mooney being freaking good, with Bijan Robinson being way more productive and more consistent than he was to start the year. Bijan has had 4 straight 20-plus point games, something that we had yet to see before his run against Carolina. So that's been great to see. Ray McLeod is taking away from Kyle Pitts. Drake London, even though he missed half the game today, he had a touchdown. He was getting more red zone usage. He looked great. If London is out for a game or two, even then I think all the more reason to sell Kyle Pitts because London's going to come back. He's going to be Kirk Cousins is getting the ball more consistently to the running backs than he is Kyle Pitts.
And to Ray McLeod at this point.
Yeah, that's what I said. Ray McLeod took away from Kyle Pitts. I can't even say his name.
So
because I'm too flustered.
A lot
of
people are going to say this is maybe a sell low. I don't think it's a sell low. Personally, I think this is still a sell high. He is still the tight end for coming into this week on the season. He's been very productive. I think you're going to have a lot of people that are trying to buy low on Kyle Pitts, and I think Kyle Pitts is a pretty bad buy low candidate just based on the fact that you have seen his usage, like Nathan said, decline in recent weeks. He doesn't have a particularly good playoff schedule either. It's kind of middle of the road. Weeks 15 through 17, Las Vegas, the Giants, and then the Washington Commanders.
Well, the Giants don't allow a lot of tight end production.
They don't.
Either,
That's one thing. The Raiders are sneaky good at that too. So it's like. So it's kind of middle of the road, but again, I think a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to buy low on Kyle Pitts after this week," and I'm thinking the opposite. As I see his usage trend down, and as I see Kirk Cousins continue to favor Ray, Mooney, London over Kyle Pitts. Also, again, Bijan, like you said, and Tyler Algier. Yep. It's a pretty crowded offense in an offense where, again, you're starting to rotate in some other players, especially at the tight end position. When you're looking at the other tight ends here, Charlie Warner actually has been the guy that has come in, and he played 26 snaps today compared to Kyle Pitts' 31. And so he is, and the targets were 1-0. It's not. Yeah, the outlook's just not super good. So I think that's why he could be a potential sell high candidate. Let's move over to Najee Harris. And Najee, he was a guy earlier in the season that I was like, okay, you got to buy Najee, because he was going to eventually score touchdowns. And 2 of the last 3 weeks he has scored touchdowns. And each of the last 3 weeks he scored 20, 16, and 16 points. Great. You got the production in your fantasy team. Buying him was the right call. Now we're going to sell him high. He is going into his bye week. He had his bye week this week. And so you might not have... I guess going back into next week, you probably would have some suitors. The main thing with Najee Harris is when you're looking at the Steelers scheduled in weeks 15 through 17, at Philly, at Baltimore, and then Kansas City. It's atrocious. It is the worst schedule. I think it's the worst schedule for running back room in fantasy football.
That's bad.
So, I mean, it's a set of the worst matchups you can get.
And he has Cleveland before that, too.
Yeah, so like
the last week of the regular
14,
season.
14 through 17 are really, really bad. Yeah. I mean, because, again, Baltimore, their secondary sucks. The run defense is good.
He's got Cleveland and Baltimore twice after this bye week.
Yeah, the rest of the season for Najee is awful from a scheduling standpoint. And so it's less, the performance of Najee Harris, because when you're looking at it from a rushing yards perspective, again, the last 3 games he's had over 100 rushing yards. This is the best I've seen Najee play in 3 years.
Yep, since his rookie season. Really.
7 yards per carry, 4.5 yards per carry, almost 5, and then 6 yards per carry in the last 3 games. 16 or more fantasy points, getting the volume. He even started to get some targets again. He's 24 targets on the year, with 38 total last year. I mean, he's outpacing that. His schedule is abysmal. And so in terms of having him on your team the rest of the season, he's just going to have tough matchup after tough matchup. Again, like Nathan said, you have Cleveland twice, you have Baltimore twice, you have Philly, you have Kansas City, and you have Cincinnati twice, as well as Washington. And Washington, their defense has been good. This is worst case scenario scheduling for Najee Harris. And so I think you take advantage while, again, buying was the right call. I think now you take advantage and you sell. I think there are going to be people, again, in casual leagues who don't realize that the schedule is as bad as it is, and I think you take advantage of that and sell him off for whatever you can get. I don't think you're going to get still a ton. I think he's still going to go for running back 2 or 3 or flex prices, but I do think it's worth shopping him, especially, and I do think if you can get anything for him, I'm doing that.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt is definitely a guy that we want to be getting rid of as soon as possible right now, because, geez Louise, talk about touchdown dependent and no receiving upside. The dude has had 3, 1, 2, and 1 targets since he has come back to Kansas City, and the volume with his carries has been great. 14 carries in his first game, 27, 22, 21. The Chiefs want to run the ball. And while Kareem Hunt is on the field and while he's getting this opportunity, he is going to be a really comfortable flex option. But even with these touchdowns, dude, his ceiling is nowhere near what you'd be looking for a guy that you're going to be comfortable starting for the rest of the year. Not to mention, we are now 5 weeks removed from Pacheco going down with that leg injury, and his timetable was 6 to 8 weeks. So you're looking, I mean, let's give a buffer. Let's be generous and say, like, after the Carolina game, you're looking at Vegas, the Chargers, Cleveland, Houston, Pittsburgh. Not only is that, before the playoffs, even when Pacheco is going to be back, but also that's not a fun playoff schedule at all.
That's why he's
Cleveland and Pittsburgh. I mean, even freaking Isaiah Pacheco, when he comes back, we're probably going to have Pacheco as a potential sell because that's going to affect him as well. So I would not be super optimistic with Kareem Hunt for the rest of the year. Even if he has, a couple of good games in the near future, again, like if Pacheco's not back by the Carolina game, Kareem Hunt has a good game against Carolina, like he's still going to get volume, right? He's going to get volume. People need immediate production now, especially at the running back position. You'll have some takers on Kareem. On some of my desperate teams, I've been a taker on Kareem because I've had to be, even though I'm not super high on him for the rest of the year. But you got to take points where you can get them. And you're going to have people that will take the points in Kareem Hunt because they just need to right now. I'd capitalize on that, get a safer guy for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
go get Tony Pollard. We have Tony Pollard as a buy. Go get Tony Pollard. You could do that.
Very straightforward. I feel like between Pacheco and the schedule, there's literally no reason I think to be rostering him. So I think you should be selling him anywhere you can. So let's go to Jaylen Waddle, and I'm gonna just stop you in your tracks. We did have Jaylen Waddle. I think it was a month ago. We had Jaylen Waddle in week 6 as a potential buy candidate. Why? Because we thought when Tua came back that Jaylen Waddle would increase his fantasy production, and we thought he'd get more targets. We thought that he'd break out of his slump, and we thought that he would be good to go. And the reality of it is, whether or not Tua has played the season has not really made an impact on Jaylen Waddle's production. He hasn't produced no matter what.
Because HN.
And that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it.
And the running backs in general.
But here's the other thing. And I think he produced some today. Tyreek's not even producing with Tua.
He's not.
They're both not producing.
No.
So with Waddle, look.
That offense doesn't look that great.
At this point, it is going to be a little bit of a sell low. I don't care. Listen to his game log this year. He hasn't had double-digit points since week 1. 16, 8, 6, 7, 8, 2, 8, and 7. He's not getting the targets. In his last 3 games, he has 10 targets combined. It's just not good for Waddle right now. The cherry on top, weeks 14 through 17. The Jets in week 14, the Texans in week 15, the San Francisco 49ers in week 16, and then the Cleveland Browns in week 17. So the playoff schedule isn't great as well. I do think, like I said, you are probably going to be selling a little bit low on Jaylen Waddle at this point. I think a lot of people are going to be moving him down your rankings. In more casual leagues, you are going to be able to get some return on Jaylen Waddle just because of name value, right? Jaylen Waddle, even if you have casual family members, friends who play fantasy, don't pay super close attention to the NFL, they know the name Jaylen Waddle because he has a pretty freaking good name. So people are going to, again, the name value, when I say name value, I mean literal name value in casual leagues is going to probably get you at least something back for Jaylen Waddle. And again, with Waddle, it's been bad all across the board. When you're looking at the opportunity, the targets, you saw him in his rookie year, he's getting a ton of targets, 56 in targets this year. So that's not great at all. And that's 66th in target rate, 42nd in receptions, 53rd in receiving yards. He's been a wide receiver 7. It's bad. He ended up being one of the worst picks in fantasy football this year. He has been one of the biggest busts, and I don't think it doesn't project well rest of the season either. So like I said, Jaylen Waddle, whatever you can get for him, I would just go ahead and sell him. I don't think he's going to be doing anything. He's honestly, at this point, he's honestly droppable almost, legit almost droppable, and you're going to have a lot of people still pay for him. So get whatever you can.
Brian Thomas is still wide receiver 7 on the season, which is crazy, especially given his outside of his weeks 3 to 5 stretch of really good target volume. He's had subpar target volume, but his big playability is so good. It really is so elite. There's a lot of elite flashes there with his big playability.
A lot.
But you're looking at outside of those 9, 9, and 8 target weeks, the last 4 weeks, 6, 5, 4, and 4 targets. Now, granted, he was banged up against Philly. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was a game time decision. They expected him to play a couple days ago, but he's been a little banged up. Christian Kirk is out for the rest of the year, and while a lot of people are going to view that as a positive, which I still think it is a positive, I'm not super excited about their outlook for the rest of the year. You've got Minnesota coming up next week, which is a good matchup. You got Detroit, which is tougher, the bye week. Then you got Houston, Tennessee, the Jets, Vegas, and Tennessee again. Tennessee twice is a killer. That is an absolute killer. When you're looking at weeks 14 and week 17 for Brian Thomas, that is, for me, the biggest concern here. And honestly, if you wanted a secondary concern outside of the schedule, I would say the last 4 weeks of his target volume being what it is incredibly concerning for me. When you're talking about when you're going for a final season stretch of production and consistency, you need more target volume than that.
Yes.
You do, because you just saw what his floor is. You had a 22-point game with 5 targets, a 15-point game with 4 targets, and a 6-point game with 4 targets. And before that, a 5-point game with 6 targets. When the guy has not scored touchdowns, he's had 11, 9, 5, and 6 points. That won't cut it when you need a 3 straight week run in the playoffs with Brian Thomas. It's straight up probably not going to happen because of those matchups. So I'm weary of going and investing in Brian Thomas. I'm weary of holding him for the rest of the year. He is a very hot name right now because he should be. He is Trevor Lawrence's number 1 option, and he is a very good wide receiver. But again, I'm just not excited about what his outlook is going to be in the second half of the year.
And I know we're going to get yelled at for that one in particular. I will say I have been the Brian Thomas truther of the two of us. I mean, hard Brian Thomas truther. Like, I love Brian Thomas as a player, as a fantasy prospect. I'm the one that looked at his rest of season schedule, and I'm the one that put him on this list. So you can come at us, but with Thomas, like, it's a business decision, and I think he could easily prove us wrong.
It's not a Vegas business decision.
I think he could easily prove us wrong, but again, I'm very high on Brian Thomas, and I think he is one of the better wide receiver prospects in a while. Yeah. And I think
and I'll back you up on this too, because like, this is why I've been lower than you on him for the whole season, is because he has that target volume has been a little bit concerning.
You were talking about Dynasty
this year.
You're talking about, well, our argument was for Dynasty.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
and so true. I still think for Dynasty, I love him. But for this year, I think, like I said, I think you could see a little bit of a production fall off. So do us a huge favor. Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe if you play fantasy football. Appreciate you guys so much. We'll see you later.